Welcome to Zero Brightness, a podcast about horror video games. I'm musician and nerd James Woodard, stationed in San Antonio, Texas, and I'm joined by my friend and fellow musician Ali Jafar, all the way from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Today we're talking about Soma, a game that makes you feel things, and think things, and maybe talk about things that you have no business talking about because you can barely grasp the concept of the hard-hitting themes contained within, like what it means to be an authentic human being. Come stumble through this minefield of deep thematic elements with us as we inarticulately unpack and deep dive into the existentialist themes of Soma. Because we're both musicians, which means we both might be stupid, but hey, maybe that's what the title means. You do not know, and there's only one way for you, the listener, to find out.
Zero brightness.
So, we had a fucking blizzard last night, so everything is just melting snow and water, and like all the sidewalks are like lakes. Like you can't walk on them. It's so fucked up. We got really high and tried to walk to the Mexican grocery store to get shit to make nachos, and we ended up, it was like this whole fucking ordeal. It was fucking crazy.
Man, and I'm worried about the humidity. It's hot as fuck here. We have the AC going. Crazy.
Monica, they have the fucking AC on.
Yeah, I was getting like legit like under titty sweat like at my desk earlier.
James said he was getting legit under titty sweat at his desk earlier. God damn it. Anyway, Soma.
Speaking of inhospitable conditions.
Okay, so today we are talking about Soma.
Yeah, I mean, since this is your favorite game, there's going to be a lot of you talking today.
I'm going to try and not talk as much. That's actually my resolution.
Really? Wow, okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
So it's up to me. So you came at this idea with this anti-game approach, and I want to know what you mean by that.
Okay, well, so last episode we were talking about hide-em-ups, which is a genre term that I think I coined. Which are basically games that are mostly conventional horror games that have the combat element removed and have like some sort of stealth element added in its stead. Now, this, covers a wide variety of games, like a lot of indie stuff, and mostly we were talking about Outlast, Outlast 2, Alien Isolation, and we talked a little bit about a company called Frictional Games. Frictional Games created Amnesia, which was probably like the biggest game in the hide 'em up style. They also created Penumbra, which sort of kickstarted this whole movement. And later, the most recent game they made, which came out in 2015, was Soma. So Soma is seemingly a similar type of game as the other games we discussed in the hide 'em ups episode. Like, it's an exploration-based horror game. There's no combat. You have to stealth around the game's enemies, etc., etc. However, I think that Soma is just a lot more extreme of an experience, like pretty much in every regard.
One thing that does stick out to me in terms of at least the hiding and antagonist mechanic is that there's only like 5 or 6 monsters in this game.
Right.
And they're limited in scope to certain areas, and they have different weaknesses and traits. So it's not really like an Outlast. There's like random grunt number 3 chasing you down a hallway.
Right.
So there are bad guys, but they're purposeful, even in almost like a storyline way.
Right. Well, and we were talking about last time with hide 'em ups. I mean, one of the things that they all seem to do is to take game mechanics and just streamline them, so that even if there are items in inventory, like you don't have to manage them, you don't have to inspect items, you don't have to solve puzzles in the traditional way. Everything just sort of happens like, it's almost like in camera, and it feels like that's because there's such a premium put on immersion, and they don't want to break the immersion.
Well, and another difference is that there's a huge emphasis on story here in Soma versus Outlast or Alien, where you could basically just ignore the entire story.
Exactly. But the thing about Soma is that I felt like it takes that streamlining to its logical conclusion. So there is no inventory. There are no items. and there are no like random enemies. Every enemy is a set piece that inhabits a specific area, and there's a specific way to get around the enemy that you have to figure out. And the game tells you or gives you clues for the most part. So when you play it, you're immediately like thrust into this world that feels even more immersive than all the other games we talked about, and even less video gamey than those games. And that's why I started to think of this as like the ultimate anti-game. And I think that in general, the horror genre, a lot of them are at the root of them anti-games, in the sense that they do everything backwards. Like they disempower the player instead of over-empowering the player. And they put an emphasis on atmosphere instead of like just telling you where to go and sort of things like that.
I am going to challenge you a little bit on the streamlining point that you brought up, though, because there was a mod to remove the combat from the game, or at least the dying. And the developer went ahead and put the mod into the game as an official part of the game. Right. And so when you start the game up, you can choose whether to turn dying on or off. And essentially that removes a big part of the game. So it's almost like the developers know that that part of the game is extraneous in a way, but they didn't like completely commit to it. It's an interesting choice that they did. I'm glad they did. And I think if I replayed the game, I would put it on easy mode. But yeah, it's an interesting choice. And it's almost like they didn't commit to the fighting and death mechanics.
Oh, I agree with you. I think that is true. And that's one of the frustrations with the game. But I still think it's kind of just like feeds into my point. I guess like maybe saying Soma is a logical conclusion isn't true. But like, well,
you have strong feelings about it. So
yeah, I mean, I guess like that's why
I can understand your bias.
Yeah, I just started to feel that way just due to, and even like the mod to take the combat out once again, it was just like, oh yeah, like this could have been the game, and that is interesting. But it does have, I mean, we'll talk about it. It does have gamey moments, and it has frustrating moments.
Right.
And like a lot of the games we talk about that are like this, there are certain moments where it's like, why is this even in here? Like, if this was how you're going to handle it, why is this even in here?
Well, this game's not particularly a walking simulator, but it has a big scoop full of walking simulator in it.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes I wonder if it would have been better as a walking simulator. I don't think the fear would have been there as much.
Right.
But I'm not sure if that was its strongest suit, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that this does have that feeling of being stuck between stations a little bit, like a lot of, you know, any work of art of this type where, you know, an artist or a group of artists is sort of like in between two places, like this sort of stuck between the classic design of Amnesia and Penumbra and something totally different, you know, which could be something new that they're working on, or, you know, something like a pure walking simulator like Gone Home, you know?
Right.
And this game does feel a little bit caught between that. I mean, but the thing, too, is that I think that they know that their strength is making horror games. And they know, at least from a marketing standpoint and like appeasing their fan base standpoint, that making horror games is a more effective way to get people to actually play them. So I think that's a big part of where the horror element is this game. Because it's also like as a sort of shock horror game, or it doesn't really succeed. But as an existential horror game, it's amazing.
Right. And it might sound like I'm being negative to it at this point on the surface, but we're at this point of like the critique, we're just talking about its formal qualities. We're not getting into like theme.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Anything. So I feel like once we get into that part of the critique, the conversation gets a lot more interesting.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But I do agree with you. And there were some moments of frustration and moments of like, why is this even here? You know?
Yeah.
Well, so maybe we should just talk about what it is. Basically, it is a game, the premise of which is that you are someone who goes to have like a brain scan done.
Right. The protagonist, I don't remember his name. I guess it doesn't matter because he's kind of a blank slate.
Yeah, his name's Simon, but yeah.
Simon, that's right. Yeah, Simon, he's in a really bad car wreck, kills his girlfriend, and they don't really know what's wrong with him. Mm-hmm. So as sort of a last ditch effort to get help, he goes and gets a brain scan by this guy that's not really a doctor yet, but he's going to be a doctor. in like some closet in the back room of a doctor's office.
He goes to like a super sketchy place, and he gets this backdoor brain scan done, and the next thing he knows, he wakes up and he's in this futuristic, decayed out, waterlogged underwater base.
Yep.
And that's the premise of the game, and he's basically just trying to figure out what the fuck is going on.
Well, the first thing you have to figure out is how to get out of that room, because that took me way too fucking long to figure out.
Yeah.
That you're just supposed to break the window. I think the first time I played that game, it probably took me 10 minutes to figure out the first puzzle.
Yeah, it is a little bit brutal, but yeah. And well, I should just say here that I think that we're totally going to like spoil everything interesting about this game.
I think that's the best way to talk about this game. So, I mean, just play it. It's short.
But I'll also say this, is that I actually knew the ending of the game before the first time I played it.
Oh, wow. I'm kind of glad I went into it blind. And I mean, I just started it last week. So
yeah,
here's some pretense. I started this game like at least 4 times and never got an hour into it. And then the 5th time I played all the way through, finally.
Right. And I think that for me, I may have had a similar experience, except that I knew where the story was going to go. And I thought it was so fascinating that I just had to see how it got there and see all the details. So right. I think the best way to play this game is probably blind. But if you are just curious and want to know if you should check it out, I mean, I don't think spoilers ruin it. It's such a rich story and such a weird, cool experience that I think knowing where it goes isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. And I mean, you can get it for a couple bucks. Just play it.
Yeah.
It's on GOG.
Yeah. Yep. That's where I got it.
Get it DRM free.
Yeah.
Like a good pirate.
Oh my God. But yeah, so pretty quickly the game sort of reveals some of its main themes by introducing a recurring sight, which is this sort of mechanical, like robotic power loader type thing that has a human consciousness and speaks in a voice and thinks it's a human. So
first impressions, I thought that was like a really 90s adventure game kind of thing. And I didn't really find it to be creepy. I thought it should just be like quirky, like beneath a steel sky kind of thing going on.
Oh, yeah, totally. But like it's interesting because like really quickly you sort of get the picture of where you are, which is that it's this sprawling underground lab that has multiple buildings that are all connected either via like tunnels or railways. And littered throughout the station are these mechanical beings that seem to have like human consciousness and speak in human voices. And they're like, a lot of them are buggy and weird, but they're still like recognizably human. So
a lot of them don't know that they're robots yet.
Right.
They don't have that perception of themselves.
Right. And even early on, like that first power loader thing you meet, like you basically have to torture it to get to the next room, and it screams a lot, which is like really fucking unsettling.
You do a lot of off-putting things in this game.
Yeah, so that's actually what one of the things in my notes, like the thing immediately that stood out to me with this game, is that it's definitely a commentary on games, like, and it definitely like it flips a normal game mechanic into something really horrifying. So it's like there's no combat in this game, but you kill a lot of shit.
I mean, how many people do you shoot in like the average video game?
Yeah.
And like, have you ever seen like a real gunshot victim?
Yeah, it's not cool.
So I guess Soma tries to sort of personalize those experiences and give them emotional weight.
Right. So it's like it makes each time that you have to kill something a choice with weight and meaning, although the meaning is sort of up to you to decide. Like, I sometimes think about, like, when I first played this game, I thought it was like, oh my God, this is aimed directly at me. Because I remember I got, I remember when Perfect Dark came out. I like pre-ordered that fucking game and I got it the day it came out and I was like super excited, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like gonna be the best game ever. And
I remember.
Oh yeah, you remember. And like, I took it home and I popped it in, and it was in like the second level. Like, I shot a dude, but I shot him in like the leg or something. And he like didn't die, obviously, because I like shot him in the leg. But unlike Goldeneye, where he would have just fallen over and gone like, ugh, and then just died, like he laid on the ground and he was like making some sort of noise. Like he was just going like, ugh, ugh, or like something, like he was suffering. And I was like so fucking traumatized. I was like, oh my God, what the fuck is this? Like, what is going on? And I actually just like turned it off, and I didn't play the single. I played the multiplayer with my friends because there wasn't anything like that in it, but I didn't play a single player again for like years.
He had a family.
Yeah, it was just like suddenly this little detail made you realize that it's like, oh my God, like I'm a mass murderer. And then I thought back to Goldeneye, like some of the Russian like base levels, you kill like hundreds of dudes.
Scientists, innocent scientists.
Yeah. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm like a war criminal. And it was so funny because that first interaction in Soma put me right back there. And I was just like a scared 11-year-old or whatever. And I was like, no.
And Soma does it over and over again.
Yep. It doesn't let up, and they all get worse and worse as the game goes on.
Yeah.
But I love the way that they set the scene in the game. I mentioned this to you when we recorded last, that like I love the opening of this game because it starts out being very unexpected, because you know it's a game. If you know anything about the game, you know it's set in the far future underwater base. You assume that you just wake up there, but you actually start in the modern day. You live like a day of this guy's life, basically.
Well, so here's the thing. I didn't really know it was an underwater base.
Oh, okay.
So the reveal when very early in the game, where a dome collapses in and you're surrounded with water. Yeah. That was actually a reveal for me.
Oh, crazy.
I did not know. So I was like, wow, we're underwater.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's like I said, the way I played this was just so weird and bizarre. I'm interested. I wonder what it would have been like if I hadn't known all this shit. But
well, it's ambiguous on purpose. Like, what is this? A moon base, like an underground cave thing? Some like fucked up hospital?
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, but I love that early section because it lulls you into this false sense of like, you know, what the setting is going to be and what the tone of the game is going to be.
Right.
Because you're just like, this dude is so boring. Like, he just has this crappy little apartment, and he like works at a comic shop, and like,
yeah,
it's just
he
like,
gets like random nosebleeds.
Yeah, and then suddenly you're just like, whoa, okay, everything's different. But
he's got a lot of problems, and a lot of the themes in this game have to do with like mental and physical health, trauma. Mm-hmm. And the name of the underground base is Pathos too. And pathos, I mean, it means like something that evokes like sadness or pity. The psychological undertones or underpinnings are pretty overt from the beginning.
It's interesting because there's all these little details kind of hidden in the opening sequence, or like things that you're supposed to pay attention to. And one of the big ones is just the basic idea of your perception. So like when you're playing the opening sequence where he's in the modern day, you can see that, like, you can see just from his like arms and his hands and whatever that he's like a human person, and you just assume that he's a human. And when it flashes forward, you assume the same thing, but then there's like these certain sections where it's just like, wait, why would he just still be like not wearing a diving suit or something, or like, what is going on? Like, it sets this scene, and it sort of messes with your perception. It's really one of the best uses of first person I've ever seen, I think.
Yeah, like what a reveal. You don't show what the protagonist looks like.
Yeah, and it just draws attention over, and we'll talk about it. Obviously, there's a big reveal in the middle of the game, but it draws a lot of attention to the body. You know, the name of the game is fucking Soma, but still, it's like using the first person perspective to literally put you in this person's body and make you think about what that means. I've never felt so much like the little dude from Men in Black who like rides around in the guy's head as I did when I played this game. So that's kind of the opening of the game. And pretty quickly you meet, once you're in the base, you pretty quickly meet your companion throughout the game, who is this scientist named Catherine.
And she's sort of your Gladys. You carry her around in your multi-tool.
Yeah, exactly. Well, early on, you think that she's a person who's contacting you from somewhere else. And then once you actually get to her, you realize that she's actually just a consciousness. That's just in a microchip. And you can kind of plug her into whatever. But for the most part, you keep her in your like PDA.
In a very Philip K. Dick way, you download her consciousness to your personal digital assistant.
Yeah.
And carry her around with you.
Right. And by this point, too, you also sort of figure out what's going on, or at least in terms of you understand that there's all these backed up human consciousnesses that are like all sort of gone awry. And somehow
you find out that there's been an extinction level event while you've been gone, and all of humanity is wiped out.
Right. Exactly.
And so because of that, the last remaining humans start working on this ARC project where they can upload essentially their souls or consciousnesses to an ARC and shoot that into space out of a space gun, which is the coolest shit I've ever heard of.
Right. Yes. And you
that's like saying all of those things out loud just made me feel like Philip K. Dick.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's interesting because there's like a plot of the game that's happening as you play the game. And also there's this parallel plot that happened some of it right before you showed up. Like it goes up until right before you showed up at the base. And it is basically telling the tale of this underground, science research facility that sort of went through this whole crazy, like civil war kind of between the people working there during this extinction level event, because they were some of the last people, maybe the last people left alive on Earth.
Right.
And, some of them one of them started the project to create this ARC that archives all their consciousnesses and sends it out into space. And then some people wanted to be a part of it. A bunch of people didn't. And then something else came in, which is the WoW.
Well, another thing that happened is that some people were so enthusiastic about the ARC project that after copying their consciousnesses onto the ARC, they decided to kill themselves en masse.
Yeah. And so there become these almost like 2 or 3 factions. Like there's the people who do that. There's the people who just want to be a part of that project, but aren't going to kill themselves. There's the people who are super against it. And then there's the people who are super against it because like at the same time that all this is happening, basically this like sentient ooze, called the WoW starts invading the whole base. And because it like gets into the computer systems, it sort of like incorporates part of this plan into its own plan. And it's all just this sort of like weird like mix of AI and human instinct. So its plan is to basically just take human consciousnesses and just machine gun fire them out into whatever, which is why there's robot power loaders and maintenance robots and
so
fucking whatever.
Protect humanity at all costs through like the weirdest means possible.
Yeah. And it's also created a bunch of mutants that are hybrids of all 3 of those things.
So remind me where the structure gel comes from. I don't remember if it was invented or discovered.
Structure gel was invented. So throughout the game, they talk about this stuff called structure gel. And it's basically like this really futuristic building material. Like you can just put it on anything and it bonds and creates a bond. So it's almost like hella fucking futuristic rubber cement.
Right.
And like,
but because of the WoW AI, the structure gel kind of becomes like a liquid cancery thing that starts taking over everything mechanical or living.
Yeah. So the WoW, which is basically becomes this AI that becomes corrupted by like an outside force, this sort of animal, almost like alien force. The WoW corrupts all the structure gel. So anything that has structure gel or that becomes infused with it sort of becomes part of this AI hive mind.
Yeah, right.
So that's why there are monsters that are all goopy and covered in structure gel is like this black goop. That's like all the main antagonists of the game are covered in that black goop with all these like nodes on it because it's corrupted structure gel.
Which I think is really evocative of the LCL from Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Oh, yeah.
Where,
Totally.
you know, spoiler alert, go watch Evangelion. There's like a human singularity event where everybody on the planet turns into Sunny Delight.
Oh, yeah. And they animate that shit in the movie.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's one of the most like what the fuck scenes ever.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. No, it totally is. And also, if you want more background, I don't know if you found this or have seen this, but they did like a little short movie that's up.
I was reading about that today.
Yeah, it's just up on YouTube in a few different parts, maybe like 8 or 9 parts.
Is it cool?
It is cool. It's really cool. And they basically made a prequel to the game where they show at least a few of the human characters when they're still alive.
That's cool.
Yeah, and a lot of it is centered around like structure gel. Like there's a guy who becomes addicted to structure gel and like goes nuts, and you see all this stuff happen, and you see some of the events that are talked about in the game actually played out, and it's super cool.
Is it like super low budget?
It's not as low budget as you're thinking. Let me say that.
It might be super cool as low budget.
It's like kind of low budget, but
looks like the satellite of love.
That would be cool, but no, it's actually it's surprisingly slick, and I think the actors do a good job. I mean, they're obviously not like, you know, Hollywood actors, but they do a really good job. And I remember watching it after you play the game is super cool, especially like right after you play the game. That's when I watched it.
Yeah,
and well, because one of the tiny scenes from it was actually used as like a teaser for the game. And it's a super cool scene. It's basically like one of the scientists trying to talk to one of the WoW structure gel infected robots. And so they use that as a teaser for the game, and that's cool.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. But then when you watch the whole thing after you've played the game, you can actually kind of see everything, and it kind of gives you the other side of the story, which is, you know, actually showing you what was going on when the people were alive.
So, okay, well, I think we're at the point where we can do more spoilers. I'd say like halfway in the game, or maybe a little closer to 2/3, it's revealed that you're in somebody else's body.
Yeah.
You're like a dead Asian woman with half her head cut off.
Yeah.
In a diving suit. And you've been fused together with the diving suit, and your consciousness is downloaded into this woman's body.
Right.
Which I feel like the protagonist is like strangely kind of cool with. He didn't really seem to overreact or anything about being in essentially like a walking corpse. I'm
going to say this, that he kind of handles it well because he has a bigger problem to deal with, which is that he has to kill himself. So the way this is revealed to you is halfway through the game, you have to go to a deeper level of the base where the pressure, the atmospheric pressure would be greater. So you need to be in a diving suit that can handle that.
Right.
And so basically, you know, Catherine is kind of being cryptic about this, like, okay, well, I'm going to, you know, transfer you into this other diving suit. Well, this is, he kind of finds out that it's like, you're just a consciousness. I'm going to transfer your body. And he's kind of like, oh, what? What the fuck? Yeah. And you're right.
Yeah. He's been dead for like 100 years.
Yeah.
And his consciousness was uploaded somehow to this body.
Yeah. The WoW picked it out of the lineup and just shot it into a diving suit.
Right.
And so they basically recreate the conditions under which he was born, which is that they find a diving suit with most of a body and then they
Right.
dump some structure gel, and they're like, okay, we're going to transfer you. And he's like, okay, I guess, like, we're going to do this, which I kind of get.
Right.
But then after that happens, they reveal the whole coin flip conundrum, which is essentially in this game's version of the technology of transferring consciousnesses. There's a coin flip. When you transfer it, it now exists in two bodies, and which perspective you are experiencing, it's a coin flip, whether you're going to be the one left behind or the new one you created.
It's not a drag and drop. It's a copy, paste, delete.
Right.
So during that transfer, your previous body is in the other room while your new body is in this high pressure diving suit that can go deeper.
Right.
And one of the many moral conundrums that the game puts you in is, do you keep the original copy or the other copy of you, or do you essentially euthanize it and you're the only one?
Right.
But that also makes you wonder if, he's not the authentic version of himself anyways. So what is authentic? And that's a reoccurring theme in the game.
Right. And it is actually a choice you can make that doesn't have any effect on the story.
Right. There are a lot of choices in the game that you can make that don't have effect on the story, which is interesting because even 2 times during the game gives you a survey about how you feel about things.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It doesn't affect anything.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting because, during these 2 parts of the storyline, you'll answer the same questions very different ways.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the things I love about this game is that, and another reason that it struck me as such a anti-game is that it takes these things that you would see in other games, like these big plot twists or the idea of a survey or the idea of a choice you would make. And instead of having it impact the story, it's made to impact the player.
Right. Yeah.
And this is actually interesting because I recently was watching this GDC talk from Yoko Taro, who's a writer. He's a game scenario writer. He wrote Nier Automata. And
there are a lot of similar themes here.
Yep.
With Nier Automata.
Yeah.
Automata.
I don't know. I just say whatever.
Keep it simple, Japan.
Yeah. And his way of writing is interesting. He basically says the moment to moment story beats in my game make no sense. In my games make no sense and don't matter. What matters is how the player feels and how I make the player feel. I've always thought that was interesting because to me, it's when you look at video games as a medium, you're sort of thinking about what is actually happening here, Well,
there is a big plot versus theme going on thing that, literature does really well. And I think video games do well, too.
Well, for sure. But I think that the reason that Nier Automata and this game are so successful at that is that they lean into what games do, which is games manipulate interaction.
Right.
So, and ultimately you manipulate the player, it's like with music, you're manipulating sound. With film or visual art, maybe it's you're manipulating, light, you're manipulating, time, certain other things. With video games, it's it takes elements of all those other art forms, but the thing that it does uniquely is that it manipulates interaction. And so writing something with the goal being, we're just going to make the player feel a certain way, or we're going to manipulate the player in a certain way is not only brilliant, it's kind of the ultimate thing to do as a video game. And this game fucked me the fuck up.
So the way in Nier Goth Lowly Girlfriend Simulator, how she just cuts down swaths of these goofy robots, and it has very little impact until a certain point in the game.
Right.
I feel like every time you kill something or make a decision in Soma, there's a huge emotional impact there.
Right. And
it's amplified.
Yeah, it's super amplified, and it just gets worse and worse as the game goes on.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I did want to talk about is the ethics of preserving humanity, right? You meet several people that are basically on death's door.
Right.
This one, the goofy thing I fucked up on. You're crawling through a tunnel at one point and you find a woman like plugged into machines and she's like almost dead.
Yeah, she's kind of half human at that point.
Yeah, I guess you're supposed to talk to her and get some information, but I was like, oh no, these plugs are hurting her. So I unplugged her and she died immediately.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Yeah. But that's what I love about this game is that it's really linear, but the moments where you have control or can make choices, they only matter to you.
Right.
You know,
right.
It's not like, oh, I had this experience or I missed this experience. Like you didn't miss anything hugely by not having that dialogue, but you missed out in the sense that you probably felt some sort of regret over that.
Yeah.
And that's how I kept feeling throughout this whole game.
They're in the situation where they want to preserve humanity, and their solution is basically to end humanity and make digital copies.
Right.
And the authenticity of like being the original copy or like the human soul. I mean, does that matter? Is being a digital copy a copy of a copy in certain points? Like, I think that's the big crux of this story.
Oh, yeah. No, I totally agree. So fundamentally, this is Existentialism, the horror game.
Right.
Which I fucking love, because Existentialism, man, that's hard to say. Existentialism is kind of the only philosophy that I give a shit about. I think it's the only philosophy that actually addresses people's day-to-day lives. Mm-hmm. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because I and everyone else who is at my job is like super depressed. And we're just
welcome to having a job.
Yeah.
That's everywhere.
Yeah. But it's been to the level where we're all just like talking about like, why do we exist? Like,
yeah,
why does religion exist and blah, 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 and all stuff. And I think,
why don't I just go live in the woods and say no to all of this?
Exactly. And
throw my hands up.
One thing that's interesting is that, you know, a conversation I had that I thought was really good was one where we kind of hit that point of like, well, the reason that all of these different ideas exist or a lot of human behavior exists is because essentially people are just overgrown animals. So they have self-awareness and they know that if they can't just live like an animal, because at some point they'll have to like reckon with what they're doing because they're self-aware. I think that existentialism is the one philosophy that actually like looks at that question. And it's like, why do you exist? What is the purpose? And there isn't an answer, but I think that some of those philosophers actually have like pretty good, pretty compact, easy to understand ideas. Like, for example, the essential self, you know, which is like a super huge theme in this game, which comes from Kierkegaard. And, you know, basically the idea of that if you want to find meaning in the world, it's self-driven. And that in order to find that meaning, you have to sort of locate and understand what is your authentic self, like what is your essence. And those ideas are not very hard to grasp. They're not very heady either. It's just sort of the idea that you'll actually like sit down and think about it.
Sure, but it could also be applied in like a macrocosm versus microcosm thing. Because here, like the only way for the human species to propagate is to take that leap, you know, into space, not just in the game, but even in real life. I mean, we're going to get to a point where the bell curve is going to either destroy humanity or we're going to leave the planet and start, you know, exploring the stars, you know, however long that might take.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And, you know, where do we draw the line between human? You know, we have all these, you know, worldly problems now, like nationalism and, you know, Christianity versus Islam and all these like bullshit things. And like, is that ever going to matter in the slightest when, you know, our humanity is like among the stars?
Right. Exactly. And I love that somebody made a fucking video game that grapples with those ideas. I mean, and actually makes you think about those ideas in a constructive way. I think that's so cool. And I really can't think of a better like story metaphor than the one that's in this game for that idea or that struggle.
Yeah, because not only did they shed all their like earthly bullshit, they shed their mortal human bodies also.
Right.
So it's almost like the purest humanity, but at the same time, it's just like a digital copy.
Right.
Very interesting, like duality.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also interesting that, like I said, that's sort of the plot that's going on as you play the game. But the sort of a parallel plot that happened before you got there is just all about people being their normal, terrible selves. Like just all this infighting and people killing each other and people fucking each other over, because the whole base is dead by the time you get there. Everybody but one person is dead. Right.
And you're like a rotting meat sack walking around euthanizing humans. But at the same time, you're the one saving the future of the species.
Exactly. And it's absurd, which is also a big tenet of existential philosophy, is the sort of fight for meaning set against the backdrop of the absurd. And you know, that's once again, that's a big like Kierkegaard thing. That's a big Sartre thing, is like the absurd, you know?
I mean, you can't have science fiction without absurdity.
Exactly. And I think that's like why this game hits so hard, is that like it embodies that type of philosophy. And and it really, really, like, once it, like I said, I think it's just like the perfect, maybe not not metaphor, but it's almost just like an allegory for all of these different, you know, elements of existentialist philosophy.
Well, it does start with a quote from Philip K. Dick too, which is, he's a old school Christian Gnostic. He's one of the like Lord of the Rings Christians. And I urge anybody to go read his essay that the quote is taken from. It's called How to Build a Universe That Doesn't Fall Apart 2 Days Later.
Right. And you sent that to me, and it's great. It's so weird.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the themes in this game and that essay run parallel. Like themes of time. Time doesn't matter to these consciousnesses.
Right.
When he turns off his PDA, her consciousness kind of just goes away. She talks about how weird it feels and how there's no semblance of time when she's not turned on, which is super fucking Philip K. Dick. Like, I can't think of anything more PKD. And he loses over 100 years. Philip K. Dick has this theory. I'm not going to get like super into theology because I'm like a mid-30s white guy. No one wants to listen to me. But PKD, he's like such a weird Gnostic that he thinks, you know, in the year 0 that when Christ died, Satan took over and time has stopped. And in 1978 was basically like 50 AD. And our life is an illusion that Satan created. And we're all living in this illusion when really like our spirits are in paradise.
Right. Well, and I think that this essay really immediately made me relate it to this game when you sent it to me, because like I said, when I was looking at existentialist philosophy, thinking about ideas like the authentic self and, you know, what is a human essence, just in the third paragraph, he says the two basic topics which fascinate me are what is reality and what constitutes the authentic human being.
Yeah. And his definition of reality is what the quote is in the game, which is reality is that which, when you stop believing it, doesn't go away.
Right. And so he sort of he posits that those are the questions that science fiction can maybe answer, or that the people who make science fiction can like strive to answer. Right. You know, and I think that's so interesting, because then you jump to this game and it's like, wow, holy shit, that's exactly what they're doing here.
Yeah, well, and I mean, 40 years later, theoretical physicists are talking about different layers of reality.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, science has always kind of followed science fiction in a strange way. I mean, Arthur C. Clarke sort of invented the satellite before anything was ever shot into space.
Hopefully Soma doesn't invent anything, because fuck.
We're fucked.
If I even see anything that kind of looks like structure gel, I'm running, dude. Like...
Dude, Singularity would be fucked up because, like, I've thought horrible things.
You don't want this brain in that milieu, motherfucker. This is not good. Hashtag not my singularity.
Oh, I would love it if all, like, the whites only people would go to a whites only singularity.
The farmers only singularity.
There's like a small niche, like Black Israelite singularity.
Oh yeah, man. Those guys have a public access show where I live.
Oh shit.
Yeah,
Is it good?
I mean, you know, if you're me.
I would watch that shit on the regs, TBH.
Oh yeah, we used to. Back when I lived with my brother-in-law, and we'd watch a lot of trash public access. We had that show, and then we had Viva and Jerry, who R.I.P. R.I.P. Jerry. Viva and Jerry were two just old people who played country music and had a weird talk show. And
nice.
Jerry was really sweet. He used to come to the guitar store that I worked at, and he'd just buy strings, but then he'd just walk around the store with you and be like, what's that thing? I'm like, oh, it's an amp. And he's like, oh my God, look at this thing. He was great.
I cherish my years working at the guitar store, meeting all the local weirdos, the pseudo celebrities that everyone knows.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that way too, but then other shit happens. Like I was there 2 days ago, and a guy with a crazy limp pulled a taser on me. That was kind of weird.
Oh man, this dude that he used to come in, he was schizophrenic. He was in his 40s. His name was Mark.
Okay.
And he would walk in and he'd grab the pointiest guitar we have, and he'd be like, "I'm Satan and you're the devil, and I'm gonna do your bidding." And he would go like sit down and play guitar all loud and fucked up, and he would like leave and go smoke crack and come back. We would have to call his mom, which was like an 80-year-old woman.
Oh,
and she would drive down in her like giant Crown Victoria, and he would buy like 2 guitars and leave with his mom. And this would happen once every 6 months.
Holy shit.
Just fucked up on speed or something.
We had a guy almost exactly like that named Clyde, who would come in like once a month and just, be Clyde. Yeah, he'd always leave cans of Coke and still lit swishers behind the amps. So like, you'd be like, man, it smells like a fucking like swisher in here. Like, why does it smell like a fucking swisher? And be like, oh yeah, Clyde like dropped one behind that like hand-wired box. I was like, oh,
It's just Clyde.
cool, man. It's Clyde being Clyde, baby. Anyway.
Where were we?
I have no idea.
Jesus.
Well, that's a break where some fake Silent Hill music will play. Dude, I've made so much fake Silent Hill music in the last few weeks that
That's awesome.
I actually found some that I forgot about.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's like a new genre. It can be like Silent Hill Wave or something.
Yamaoka core.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I coined that.
Oh, that's the dude?
Yeah, Akira Yamaoka.
I get it now. I love it. Just do everything in kanji. Make it look like it's on a VHS tape.
Oh yeah, dude. Wave. So wavy.
I want you to VHS me some of those Black Israelite made for TV.
I know.
Dude, that sounds so awesome.
Those guys are rad. I wish I would have recorded some. It was like so out of pocket. They were.
I mean, it's basically the equivalent of like talk radio, just like conservative hate trash, you know?
Yeah.
I just want to see it from a different perspective, you know?
Well, these guys were just crazy because, like, okay, so, like, if you were a Muslim kid in the 90s and you grew up in an area with, like, that was, like, predominantly black, like I did when I lived in Cincinnati, you were exposed to, like, a lot of black culture that was taking parts of Arab and Muslim culture. And so, like, even just listening to rap music and hearing, like, 5%er talk, like, it would be like, why are these guys using like Arabic, like Muslim terminology? Like it was
What
really,
does that mean?
Oh, 5%er?
Yeah.
Oh, 5%er was like this sort of, it wasn't really a religion, but it was kind of like a way of thinking that was super popular among like 90s hip hop dudes. It basically takes it, the name comes from the idea that they take like 5% from like everything, like all these different religious ideas. But a big thing that they like to do is like backronyms and stuff like that. It's very, very heavily connected and highly similar to the Nation of Islam.
Interesting.
And like Nation of Islam is basically like a little bit of Islam, and then like a bunch of like pro-black thought, and then like a bunch of other weird like mysticism ideas. So like definitely some Gnostic shit in there, definitely some like Kabbalistic shit in there, you know? And the 5%er was kind of like the pop version of that movement. And they love backronyms just like the Nation of Islam does, and like there's all this weird stuff in there. So like, okay, for example, like if you're listening to the Wu-Tang Enter the 36 Chambers, right? That is like the most 5%er out fucking record ever. And if you don't know what they're doing, you won't even catch it.
Yeah, I think that's dog whistle 5%erism, because I had no idea.
Yeah, okay, so here's a couple examples. One example is that they refer to men as gods and women as earths. And so when you hear them talk about like the gods, like they're talking about like the dudes, or like if you hear them talk about like the earths, they're talking about like women. Another thing is that they repeatedly make reference to arm, leg, arm, head, which is like a backronym for Allah, which is, you know, the Arabic word for God. And like in their like mystic like methodology, basically man is God. So man is Allah, and the backronym for it is arm, leg, arm, head, the form of a man.
I love this. I love that I didn't know any of this, and
Dude.
I'm learning all of it.
Yeah, Wu-Tang have a ton of it. MF Doom has a ton of it.
Didn't Nas get sort of pseudo-spiritual too?
Oh my god, Nas has a fuck ton of it. Nas is
Yeah.
probably like the most famous artist to actually be like super deep into this stuff.
Yeah. That's dope. I had no idea.
So I guess after the big reveal that basically not only are you just a consciousness uploaded into a diving suit, but also that every time you upload your consciousness somewhere else, you may not make it.
Yeah. The coin toss.
And the coin toss idea is introduced. After that, it's basically just the game becomes you going deeper into the base and trying to get to the space gun so you can launch the Ark and maybe potentially escape. And I think at this point it's not a bad idea to talk about like what you actually do in the game, which we haven't really done, at least in terms of like the enemies and what they are.
There's really only, I think, 5 antagonists in the game. You could tell me or not if they're related to crew members. I know one is. The coolest monster is Ross, which he was the guy that was against. I think he wanted to pull the plug on the AI pretty early, and he was against uploading everybody's consciousnesses too.
Right.
He was kind of the Amish of the group. He was anti all this shit.
Yeah, the Luddite.
The Luddite, yeah.
Yeah.
So he's kind of the coolest monster because several times he kind of speaks to you telepathically, and he'll pop out and scare the shit out of you, but you never have to like run from him, and he can't kill you.
Yeah. Yep. And yeah. Sorry, I'm laughing at your notes because for one of them you said tentacle face. No one likes you, motherfucker. Which is really funny, but
That's totally the worst part of the game.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I like the enemy design in this game because yes, sometimes it ties into the plot. There's moments where it's kind of suggested that these used to be crew members. There's one that definitely is. And the other thing is that one of the big things you do in the game, besides just going around exploring, is collecting audio logs and then collecting notes and emails. And if you're thorough or lucky, you'll get the right ones that tell you how to deal with the enemies. A lot of the enemies are designed so that they have one obvious weakness, like either they're blind or they won't attack you unless you look at them.
Right.
You know, stuff like that. And I like that idea that if you're being thorough and finding the clues, then most of the enemies are like relatively easy to deal with. And that they become just like a puzzle element in the game. But it's like I said, it's an integrated puzzle element. You don't have to stop and put blocks into place or something.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them aren't that bad. There were just a couple interactions where it was very trial and error, and you die 10 times in a row, and it's not fun, and it's already proved its point, and it's not scary anymore. So you just kind of trial and error, specifically on the part where you have to run back to the escape pod on the Curie shipwreck.
Yeah.
You I think you blow up some reactors or something, and you're running back, and I think it's the flesher. It will just kill you immediately if you don't start running the right direction.
Yeah,
I think I had to play it like 6 times.
That's actually the exact thing I was thinking of.
Yeah,
when we were talking about this earlier, that part is terrible, and you just actually have to know the exact right route, and you have to just keep running and not stop. And unless you do it perfectly, you die.
Yeah.
I think those are the moments when I started to feel like the story mode would have been better, or that the game would have been better without most, if not all, of the enemies. But I think it's that same idea. It's when you push a game so far into not needing those elements that they can sometimes feel a little extraneous. But
yeah. Well, and we dogged on Layers of Fear previously for not having any danger in it, and it just being sort of, walking through a haunted house sort of thing.
Right.
So, I mean, it is kind of a thin line you have to walk between being gamey and just telling a story.
Exactly. And I think that for most of the game, it's well maintained. And like I said, I like this sort of being the game's like puzzle element, or this sort of being the game's like danger element, because, some of these enemies are freaky. And like sneaking around beneath them is really, really fucking tense. And it really adds to the game. Like, I liked those parts, and I liked being, kept on edge.
Right.
So, but I definitely think that there's moments where it's like, well, we didn't need that. We didn't need the fucking reactor part. That was stupid as shit.
Right. And I do feel like the strongest spooky parts are just the general submechanophobia.
Right.
Sort of going through the deep sea, like walking untethered for like long stretches where you can't see very far in front of you.
Yeah, totally. There's a really freaky part where it's almost like you're caught in a storm, and it's like super dark, and you just have to keep pressing forward, and it's really unnerving.
Yeah. Even if you're just solving like a simple puzzle underwater, there's like a constant sense of foreboding.
Right. And it's cool because, I mean, the game is beautiful, and there's a lot of areas of it that are just like super gorgeous and kind of naturalistic, but they keep throwing in these elements like, there's all this decaying machinery and these things floating around, and the music and all these things.
And even though you're outside, you never see the sun.
Yeah. I love how it creates that unease. And in a lot of ways, I think it's more effective because there are times where it does shift into a more visceral horror, so that you can sort of appreciate the other parts of the game where it is more languid and slow moving. But because there's a tension that exists, not only because you're thinking about all this heady fucking bullshit, but also because you're like, well, I'm eventually going to have to, meet the Chinese vampire again.
Yeah. And we're getting an elevator, and it's a video game, so the elevator's going to fall.
Yeah. Yup. Yeah, I like how it balances all those different elements. And it uses all of them to suggest to pivot back towards like the bigger themes in the game. It uses all those elements, to suggest those themes, or to make you like think about those themes. So like the fact that you're stuck in this super barren, like dark world means that when you meet something that can talk and that you can interact with, like there's almost this instant empathy that's created, and then they just keep piling on that. So when you have to kill the thing, or you have to torture it, or do whatever, it's like that it really kind of pushes that empathy button,
Sort of like Silent Hill 2.
Oh yeah, totally. I think Silent Hill 2 is really similar to this game in a lot of ways, just the loneliness that it creates.
Yeah. And you gotta kill Eddie.
I just wanted to eat pizza alone, and like he accidentally shot a guy in the leg. Like, whatever, dude. It's not
all he wanted was a Pepsi.
Oh my god, he's like the physical embodiment of that song. Well, and I think too, another thing that all those things combined create that Silent Hill 2 also does really well is using apocalyptic fiction as like a simulacra of depression.
Right.
This is something that I started to think about a lot after thinking about a few different works of art. You know, this game is a huge one. Silent Hill 2 is another really good one. Melancholia is a really good one. And Neon Genesis Evangelion, obviously.
Yeah.
Probably like the OG of all of these. Like, the thing that all those things I just listed have in common is they put you inside or in the aftermath of or right before like an apocalypse scenario. And they use it almost like a metaphor or just more as a tool, I guess, to suggest how it feels to be depressed. Or at least to me, that's how I always interpreted those pieces of art, because like when you're really fucking depressed, it really does feel like everything's over or everything's ending all the time. And I felt like when I took in any of those pieces of art, it made me feel the way that I feel when I'm like super depressed. And if a game or a work of art does it well, it gives you that feeling, but you know, if it has a good reason to exist or something to say, it feels really powerful and really meaningful.
I'm just thinking of all the similarities between Evangelion and the Soma now. I mean, even the suits in Evangelion, aren't they organic biomaterial?
Yeah, for sure.
Isn't his dead mother in one?
Yeah, I think him and Asuka both have their mom in there.
Yeah, and then so in Soma, like Simon's in like a dead woman's body.
Yeah, exactly. And it raises these questions, and it like makes you think about, God, like, what the fuck?
Yeah. And then Catherine's like pressuring Simon to like pilot the suit.
Yeah, dude, no, Catherine is totally Gendo. And you have that in the note that like Catherine and Johan, who is the scientist who becomes one of the big antagonists, they both have an ethical ambiguity. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely. Everyone does in this game.
Yeah. They're pushing really hard for an agenda, but there's no clear answer as to who's right or what is like the appropriate outcome for humanity.
And in the end, we're all just gonna become Sunny Delight.
Yeah, pretty much. So as the game goes on, some of the big bullet points of the late game is one of your notes here, James, that I love is in all caps, euthanizing the last human ever.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point is to save humanity, and you're like a walking robot, human corpse, meat bag, and you're begged by the last human being on the planet to euthanize them.
Yeah, and you do it.
What a dark scene.
Oh yeah.
You can sit on the couch and watch them die.
Yeah, it's fucking brutal.
A side note for a little bit of levity. Games where you can pick up any object and just kind of like drop them and throw them around.
Yeah.
With games like that, I can't help but constantly fidget and play with things.
Yeah.
So after the last human being died, I put a trash can on top of her head and then put a suitcase on top of the trash can.
Oh man, I'm glad you treated that scene with the weight that it really created. I'm imagining like her breathing her last breath and then the Benny Hill music starting up. Oh god. So, you know, I guess after that, the next big thing that happens is the end sequence of the game. Which is basically you taking the Ark, which I don't know if we said it before, but it's essentially just like a computer simulated environment that all the consciousnesses that have been collected from this study at the station are going to be, you know, inserted into, and they'll basically live as, you know, AI simulated consciousnesses in like a simulated paradise.
It's sort of like double arc because it has the Noah's Ark connotations with putting everybody on this thing and sending them off. And then it also looks like the Ark of the Covenant, something like what's the first Indiana Jones? Raiders of the Lost Ark? Yeah, it sort of looks like that as you're walking around with it.
Yeah, totally. And so, yeah, the plan is to get this thing into the space gun, shoot it in the space. And yeah, they keep saying this phrase over and over where they're just like, life among the stars, Yeah. It's almost like the sales pitch for it. And it's one of the unnerving things that Catherine does is that she kind of keeps repeating this sales pitch because she's the scientist who started the program and created the Ark. So you kind of get...
It's kind of like Shaun of the Dead with the Winchester. They're just going to get to the Winchester and wait for it to all blow over.
Oh, man, that's really good. Yeah, that's true.
We're just going to get shot out of the space gun, hang out in space, wait for it to all blow over. Yeah,
exactly. And so the original... Or sorry, what ends up happening in the end is they take the Ark to the space gun. There's sort of a tense countdown. Seems like for a second that it's not going to actually work. And then it does. They upload all the consciousnesses into the Ark. Everything's ready to go. And they fire it into space. The upload finishes like right as everything is ending. And your player character is like celebrating and like, yeah, we did it. And I was like, Catherine, can you believe it? And then she's like, yeah, man, it's so great. And then he just fucking sits there and he's like, okay, I'm ready to go now. And she's like, we did. We're in there, but we lost the coin toss. And the game has kind of explained this to you already, but even Catherine says, she's like, I can't believe I have to explain this to you again, you dumbass. Like, it's a coin flip. Your consciousness is in there, but your point of view is different from your consciousness. You've been duplicated. So yeah, you lost this one, but you won the other one. So sorry. And then power dies and you're left alone.
With your thoughts. Forever.
Yeah.
So
that's the end.
I just realized that was the plot of Left Behind, the movie.
Oh, man.
Starring Kirk Cameron.
What?
You're left behind.
Yeah. I guess. Yeah, I guess everyone in the Ark got raptured.
Yeah, it's totally the rapture. They went to paradise and then you're left behind on Earth.
Right. And so there is a post-credits thing that shows your consciousness like in this paradise world with Catherine. And so it's interesting because as you put in the notes here, both the good and the bad ending happen simultaneously. The game has one ending, but it's like multivalent. Like there's two sides of it and it shows you both sides of it.
Well, I mean, there's four Simons essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
One died in 2015. One you euthanized because you're Simon 3. And Simon 3 dies at the bottom of the ocean, and then Simon 4 lives on the Ark.
Right. Well, and it's such a great ending, and it's such a great moment when you realize that you're not on the Ark, or that like your point of view, and that this guy's just stuck in this diving suit full of rotting meat at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah. Well, I think I at that point, I had thought that I had just gotten like the bad ending or something.
Yeah.
But it goes ahead and gives you both.
Yeah. And I love it because it's once again with the philosophy that this game has been espousing and talking about it, that, is totally what would happen, where it's like, what you're trying to search for this meaning against the absurd. You're trying to figure out why you exist, and you're trying to figure out how to, continue and keep going and finish this tale of survival. But it's like, you already died.
Right.
The solution that you came up with and that you're fighting for is incredibly absurd. Why would you even consent to this? Why would you fight for this? Like, it's so stupid. And because you're just like this like audacious human, you're just like, well, I'm just going to keep doing it. And yeah, man, you lose like super hard.
Well, at least we know that one of the 4 protagonists goes to heaven.
Right. But I love even that idea where it's like you, the player, get to decide how you feel. Like, was the whole thing a lark because you died in 2015? Was the whole thing a success because one of you ended up in the ark? Does none of it matter? Should you have even tried, or should you have not trusted Catherine? Is Catherine actually the antagonist of the game? Like, it's such a well-written story because all the answers come from you. There's no answer to any of those questions that's like canon, you know?
Well, I mean, like, everybody wants to go to heaven when they die. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
you can be an atheist and still want to go to heaven when you die because you don't want life to just end. So, I mean, is an artificial heaven worse than no heaven?
Right. And then it's also like, I mean, once again, it sort of gets into some ethical stuff where it's like, well, what did you actually create? And what's the maintenance on that arc up there?
Yeah.
Like, what happens if it gets hit by a comet? And like, did you send all those people to their doom? Like, should you have left them dead? You know?
Right.
There's a little bit of an absolution of that because like the WoW came and started this whole process of shoving things into other things that you're just sort of continuing on with. But ultimately that didn't have to happen, you know?
I mean, I feel like you'd want to keep this kind of stuff in triplicate too. I mean, shoot several out of the space gun.
Right. But like, it's also like everything's collapsing around you while this is happening. It's kind of this desperate struggle to try and get this out there because everything's falling apart. But I love that the game shows you both sides of it, where like the people who are, you know, in the ark and the people who are stuck on Earth, because it really makes you think about what is the end game of the Earth that's left, which is like literally just an ocean full of these crazed half human machines. Which is just the most terrifying thing.
It's assumed that you kill the WoW, so the AI is not going to keep spreading.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of people link the end of the world to the end of mankind. Mm-hmm. But there's still a lot of sea life in the game. And I think that's indicative. I think that's kind of like showing to the player that, like, even though mankind's done, the planet's not. But I feel like the big question here is that is authentic humanity more important than the Ark humanity, since the Ark humanity is just cheap copies.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like, it's a real fucking thinker.
Yeah, and I mean, the science fiction writers have been talking about it a long time, like posthumanism and transhumanism. Mm-hmm. Like, where do we draw the line there? Yeah,
this is definitely transhumanism, the game. And I think, I mean, specifically to keep talking about Philip K. Dick, because I think he is the most relevant author to this game. Like, a lot of his stories ask that same question or try and find an answer to that same question, just with much less extreme means. Like, Soma is a very extreme story. Like, holy hell, you know? It's like if Philip K. Dick is thrash metal, this is like extreme, like porno death metal. Like, it's so brutal. But the thing too with Philip K. Dick, he asked these same questions a lot, you know, just even with questions of reality, like in Scanner Darkly, which is probably one of his more like earthbound novels. You know, he gets into this identity spiral of like, who am I? What am I doing? Who am I even like surveilling? You know, what's going on, you know, or you get these questions with like, do androids remove electric sheep, where it's like, if what I want is this experience, whether that's like experiencing the joy box or having a real pet, or like, if I accept a recreation, am I accepting less? And video games are really an amazing medium to ask that question, because the whole idea of a video game is to have a simulated experience and to have it be as meaningful and important as a real experience. Like, that's the end game. of games.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about joy boxes here.
Yeah, these are the literal joy boxes, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that a game that goes all the way down into those issues, at least for me, it made me not play video games for a while, and it made me just fucking think about shit.
Yeah, this one's definitely a thinker. I mean, just like a great movie, you think about it afterwards. It's one of those games where it makes you want to write a small essay about it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I actually watched The Lobster last night.
Yeah.
And that's like totally the same kind of vibe. But I think with Soma, the reason I was drawn to it so much is not only because, I mean, based on everything we're talking about, it's just shit I love. Philip K. Dick, you know, existentialism, kind of janky, broken down sci-fi worlds. Like, this is all shit that I love, but I also love
video games.
Spooky video games. I also love that it just decided to tackle the basic question of what does it mean to be human, and then tackle it in a super weird, grotesque, like Cronenbergian way.
Yeah, absolutely. It scratched the itch of everything that I like about heady sci-fi, while wrapping it in a fun adventure game. Now,
Yeah.
it's not my favorite game of all time. It might be your favorite game, but
It's not my. It's up there for me. I would say it's up there.
I mean, in terms of theme, I could think of a few games that make me think about it so much afterwards. And I think it's really notable for this medium.
I think that's hugely notable. And the other thing too is, well, and maybe to kind of bring this back to what we were talking about at the beginning of it, which was anti-games, like my whole concept of that. Like, I think the reason that this game, what seemed important to me was that when you look at a conventional game, it, as a storytelling medium, it has a ton of issues. I mean, it has so many issues that it created a long term for it, ludonarrative dissonance, that like explains why it's weird that you can murder 1,000 dudes and then cry over the death of like a random person. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
Your in-game character. Like, it has weaknesses as a storytelling medium. And I think that people who make horror games, a lot of times they're moving so far away from the core of the medium anyway, which in my mind is like traditional arcade type games. You're moving so far away from it that you're coming up with solutions for how to just get further and further out. And at the same time, some of those are actually creating solutions for how to deal with the problems that traditional games create. So I think in Soma, there's this interesting thing happening where it's like, how do you create a game where you tell a story and then all the actions in it also feed into the story, and you never do anything that's out of character? You know what I mean? And everything feeds into the main theme. So like every action you do feeds into the main theme of the game. And I think that this game does that so well that it starts to feel like something totally different, whether that's not a game or some sort of highly evolved version of a game. And I think that's so fascinating. It's not that nobody's ever done that, but in this medium, it's to me, the purest expression of it.
Yeah, I mean, would you put this in the realm of like auteur gaming, like something from Grasshopper Manufacturer?
I guess, but it's way better just because like it doesn't use any easy cop outs or like, you know, take any easy paths. Like, I think with Grasshopper, it's almost like they embrace the absurdity to an extent that can be sometimes frustrating, where it's just like, especially, I mean, I think once you get into the more modern stuff, or the more recent stuff they've done, where it's
almost like Dada.
It is. And at moments it feels so forced. Like, I think the first time I started to think that maybe like Goichi Suda was full of shit is like the end of No More Heroes. Where he like fast forwards through that person's monologue and then he's like, see, you didn't even care because you're just like a dumb Cheeto dust covered fucking idiot gamer. And
I mean, he's not wrong.
But he's also not right. Like, and it's also not clever to make that observation or break the fourth one. Do you know what I mean? It's like, if you're going to indict people for being stupid, you have to indict everyone and yourself. Because it's like, everything is stupid. And I think like...
You're not Lars von Trier.
Yeah. It's like moments like that are sort of like, oh, that's so frustrating. But a game like this, it's like, yeah, everything is absurd and everything is terrible. Here's like a complete tightly wound experience explaining why that is the case.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because like as much as I love this game, I've actually told certain people I know not to play it, or I've warned people like only play it if you're in the mood for this, man. You know, because it's like,
yeah, I would say, I mean, play it on story mode. Enjoy it for the story. There's just too many frustrating bits with the hiding.
Yeah.
And I mean, I say that as a video game veteran, and I've played like, I mean, a billion adventure games.
Yeah.
And some are better without combat, and I think this one's better without combat.
Yeah, I could see that. I need to do a playthrough with the story mode.
Yeah. I mean, the spooks are good, but the submechanophobia gives you the spooks, and I don't know, a lot of things give you the spooks without having to hide behind desks.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, that's the thing. Is like ultimately the real horror of this game is in the philosophy of it and in the story of it. It's the spooky parts are just fun if you like that stuff. But
yeah, I mean, if you're a walking simulator fan and you don't want to deal with hide 'em up stuff, just play it as a walking simulator. You'll be happy.
Oh, I agree. And I think I do kind of look at that as one of the game's strengths, at least at this point in time, now that's been patched and all that. That's like, you can enjoy it how you want to enjoy it. You can enjoy it in either way. I think that's a super cool element.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fucking great. I don't know. It's just like if you're in the mood for something really heavy that makes you think, and it is just like something you're really going to chew on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of other games that would make you think this much. Very few.
Yeah. I mean, and especially ones that don't come with a ton of baggage. Like either some of the stuff that it's saying is really dumb, or that like some of the mechanics of playing it aren't fun and don't feed into it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
Man, I have such mixed feelings about Metal Gear Solid 2. And a lot of it is just like there's these certain sequences that are crazy and amazing. And then there's like everything else in the game.
Yeah, I keep thinking of Shadow of the Colossus in terms of the moral ambiguity.
Yeah.
And emotional weight of killing.
Yeah. Shadow of the Colossus is probably one of the few games I think that is kind of on this level where everything in the design points you towards the themes of the story.
Well, there's not much else to it. You know? It's aesthetic and theme. The plot is barely there. Yeah.
Exactly. But I love shit like that. I love that type of game design. There's a game called Rime, R-I-M-E. Did you play that game?
Yeah. Great game.
I fucking loved it.
It's one of those no dialogue games.
Yeah. And it was funny because a lot of the people were just like dunking on it for like, oh, do you want to play Shadow of the Colossus? It's basically just that. But I loved that game and I thought it was actually really different. It was like a totally different genre of game. It had a totally different way that you interacted with the world.
Yeah, it was more eco than Colossus.
Yeah. And even at that, once you actually unraveled the story and got what it was trying to say, it's just so good. And one of those games where you just want to turn around and do another playthrough because it's like, man, that's fucking cool.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's got that kind of like sun bleached, cell shaded look.
Yeah.
Like Wind Waker or something. Really charming. And
it's got a great like kind of orchestral soundtrack, which I'm not usually a huge fan of in games as much as everyone else, it seems. But no, it's really great. And it's once again, it's one of those experiences where it's so pared down and minimal and everything points you back into the theme of the story. So it's not necessarily that I like games that are more linear or games that don't give you as many options with what to do. I like games where everything is designed to support an idea.
Right. Well, pushing that even farther, did you play Abzu?
No, I've been meaning to for years. I need to fucking do that.
Yeah. Yeah, same deal. It's even more linear. Yeah. And maybe even more pared down story. Just atmospheric storytelling. Yeah, it's pretty great.
I think that, I mean, it's interesting because I'm seeing more and more the discussion of why haven't video games moved more in that direction, or like why haven't video games made more moves to reconcile that sort of ludonarrative dissonance. And
because fucking Battle Royale, bro.
Well, Battle Royale, I think, is kind of a genius because it's the opposite end of the spectrum. It's like do you want just nothing but this, you know? And I'm sort of looking at the total opposite of that, which are games like this. And it's like, I want that. And I'm glad that we're seeing a little bit more of it. But it does, once again, it feels like it's an evolution that has to happen at some point.
Yeah. I guess even Battle Royale is reductive in a way, right? It does the one thing, and that's what it does.
It was like playing Counter-Strike back in the day. Like, there was no ludonarrative dissonance because there's no fucking narrative. It's terrorists win or counter-terrorists win. All right. Yep. Well... See, like, Soma's just such a bummer that eventually you have to talk about something totally different just to, like, lighten the mood. But that was my one warning to my friends who were interested in it. I was like, make sure you're not, like, really feeling bad or doing bad.
Suicidal.
Yeah. I mean, I'm 100% serious. Or, like, I was like, man, if I had been doing bad, even worse when I played that game, I may just have been like, whatever, dude. You know?
Yeah.
Serious shit. So,
Heaven's Gate, dude. Don't buy them Reeboks.
I do love white Reeboks. I've been known to rock white Reeboks when the occasion requires.
Little Heaven's Gate logos on the side.
Oh, man. We should be careful because apparently the one guy who's left on Earth from Heaven's Gate will sue you on their behalf.
Oh, really?
Did you hear about that?
No, well, I'm ready to go, man. My space gun is loaded.
No, Lil Uzi Vert wanted to put out an album that had the Heaven's Gate logo on the front, and they that guy sent him an email. It was like, yeah, they left one guy on Earth. It's me, and yes, I will sue you.
Wow, that's crazy.
He runs the email account, so if you email him, he'll answer your questions about like what they believe and stuff.
I mean, like, why wait on Earth when you could build a space gun and meet the aliens in space?
I mean, yeah, if this was a service, I'd be into it.
Yeah, space as a service, SAS.
Yeah, dude, like fucking upload my consciousness into my metal zone and just fire me into space.
Fuck. Yeah, that shit needs to be kept in triplicate, man. Like RAID 0, RAID 10.
I think I need to go start a math rock band so I can use that as a song title now. So I think I have to go.
Upload your consciousness to a RC420 looper. Yeah, it needs to be a looper, right? With one of the SD card slots?
Yeah.
Like a Digitech time machine?
Yeah, I don't have one of those. I have one with a USB port though, so.
Yeah.
Is that enough?
You have to think about backwards compatibility. I mean, in a few thousand years, will they have the USB cable?
Yeah, man. USB-C probably isn't going to hang around that long. Or will it? You know? I don't know.
You're going to have to save your data to a crystal skull.
Yeah, okay. I mean, as long as I can go get one from Micro Center.
Dude, I can't wait till crystal skull form factor is standardized across all mediums.
You know, I don't know. I've heard that it's like actually kind of slow to upload your consciousness into one, so I don't know if I have that kind of time.
It's so bulky too. I'm just thinking about like having like a man purse full of crystal skulls.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know, imagining that it's the year 3000 and my messenger bag is enormous and full of crystal skulls. No thanks.
Get with the times, Anunnaki.
I was promised a lot more out of my terrible future, and I'm gonna hold them to that.
I was told that my dystopian future would be crystal skull free.
We're going to be cloud computing our consciousnesses by then, so yeah, thanks, but no thanks.
The Anunnaki invented cloud computing.
Yeah.
Look it up, dude.
The Anunnaki also invented space guns. They just have everything good.
They invented space, yeah. Look it up. Shit's wild, dude. Ancient Aliens Season 7 is really where it hit its stride.
Oh god, don't say Ancient Aliens to me.
I miss Ancient Aliens. Those first 2 seasons were fire.
Yeah.
But then it was like aliens and cowboys and shit.
Yeah, I definitely think the first Ancient Aliens EP was the best one.
Oh yeah, for sure. They burned out bright early.
By the time that first LP came out on Nuclear Blast, it just wasn't good anymore.
Rip Sukalos.